Hey everybody, welcome back for another deep dive.
All right.
This time, we're going to be looking at Erich Fromm,
Oh, excellent.
a really fascinating thinker from the 20th century. You sent over some selections from Escape from Freedom,
Yeah.
his book, and particularly the sections about freedom and democracy in modern society,
Oh, right.
which I think is really relevant for everyone listening.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think one of the really interesting paradoxes that he kind of surfaces right at the beginning is that, in modern society, we have more freedom than ever before.
You do.
But at the same time, so many of us feel like totally powerless, like we're just these tiny little cogs in a big machine. So how does he explain that?
Well, that's really the core of his argument, right? That, while modern democracies, they've given us a lot of freedom from these traditional authorities,
Right.
Like monarchs or the church or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
They haven't necessarily brought us true individual freedom.
So why is that? Why are we feeling so powerless? Like, where does that come from?
Well, I think for a big part of it is kind of the economic side of things.
Okay.
Like the way that modern industrial societies, especially, when they reach this like later monopolistic phase, they just kind of inherently lead to this isolation and this feeling that individuals just don't have that much control.
Yeah, and I can totally see that. Just think about how often do you feel like a number at work, right? Like you're just this cog in a giant machine.
Absolutely. I think all of us have felt that at some point.
And Fromm would say that's not just, like some random feeling.
Right.
That's actually built into the system.
Right. It's structural.
Structural. Yeah.
And he even calls people who kind of conform to these systems without even realizing it automatons.
Oh, wow.
They might think they're making choices, but they're really just going through the motions.
That's kind of a scary thought, right? Like being an automaton.
Yeah, it is.
And it almost seems like it's a trap too, right?
It is.
The more you conform, the more powerless you feel. And then the more you conform. So it's like this
vicious cycle.
It's vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not just in the workplace, right? Like Fromm says, these societal pressures start way early.
Way back.
Like even in childhood.
Childhood, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think we can all relate to this a little bit where we feel like we have to push down our real feelings.
Oh, for sure.
And just kind of put on this mask of like, what's acceptable.
It's like that fake smile that you have to put on sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Like when you're supposed to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
But inside you're like,
You're not feeling it.
I don't really want to smile right now. Yeah, but you have to,
Right. You're performing.
Yeah, it's like we're all actors in this big play or something.
And what's really fascinating about it is that it's not just, the negative emotions that we're suppressing.
Oh, right.
It's like the positive ones too.
Yeah.
Brahman says we're also kind of shutting down our genuine joy, our excitement, even our sense of the tragic things in life.
And I think this is where it gets really interesting because Fromm says that this modern society's denial of death, which is, like the ultimate tragic thing.
It's an inevitability.
It's going to happen to all of us. Like, why are we so afraid of it?
Exactly.
And he says that by denying it, we're actually making our experiences shallower. Like, we're so busy trying to avoid all the unpleasant stuff that we end up kind of numbing ourselves to the good stuff, too.
Yeah, it's like we're losing this whole dimension of experience.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you've got this kind of cultural obsession with being rational.
Right.
With having this like normal personality.
Yeah.
It just kind of pushes us even further into this very, very narrow box.
Yeah, like there's only a few ways that it's okay to feel.
Right.
And all the other ways are not okay. And Fromm even asks this really like a mind-blowing question. Do we even know what we really want anymore?
Oh, interesting.
He says we often chase after these goals that we've been conditioned to desire, not things that genuinely come from inside of us.
So like think about your own big dreams for a minute.
Okay.
Are those really yours?
Okay.
Or are they what you've been told you should be aiming for?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And Fromm ties this back to all these different forms of authority that operate in the modern world.
Right.
It's not just, the government or whatever. It's like common sense,
Mm.
public opinion, this pressure to fit in.
It's like we're constantly looking over our shoulders to see what other people are doing.
Are we doing this right?
Yeah, are we doing it right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's kind of scary to think that we might be losing our sense of self.
Losing ourselves.
Yeah, losing ourselves in this whole process of just chasing approval from everybody else.
Yeah, it's like we're trading authenticity for approval.
Fromm doesn't really sugarcoat it, does he?
No, he doesn't pull any punches.
No, he doesn't. But the good news is he doesn't just leave us with this like totally bleak picture. He actually offers a way out of this whole trap.
Okay.
He calls it positive freedom.
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me more about positive freedom. All right, well, let's dive into that in the next segment.
Yeah, let's do it.
So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
All right, so last time we were talking about Erich Fromm
Yeah.
and his idea of positive freedom as like a way out of this trap of conformity and powerlessness.
Right. It sounded way better than being an automaton.
Oh, for sure. Way better.
Yeah.
So positive freedom for Fromm,
Yeah.
it's about expressing like your whole integrated personality.
Okay.
Your true self,
I love that.
but doing it in this spontaneous and joyful way.
So it's not just about breaking free from like external rules. It's about actually like expressing who you are at your core.
Yeah, exactly.
But how do we make that happen? How do we actually bring this positive freedom into our lives?
Well, for Fromm, he really emphasizes love and work,
okay.
but not in like the typical way you might think of them.
Right.
So for him, love, it's not about possession.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about like dissolving yourself into the other person.
Okay.
It's about this spontaneous affirmation of the other person
I like that.
for who they are.
Yeah.
And then work.
Yeah.
It's not just about like earning a paycheck.
Okay.
It's about expressing your creativity
Yeah.
and connecting with the world in a meaningful way.
So it's about aligning your actions with your true desires and finding joy and fulfillment
Yeah,
in everything you do,
exactly.
which sounds amazing,
It does.
but also kind of a tall order.
Oh, it's definitely a journey,
Yeah.
not a quick fix.
And especially in our like crazy complicated world.
Oh, yeah. The world's not exactly set up for it.
Right.
But Fromm thought that positive freedom can help us
Yeah.
overcome those doubts and insecurities
Okay.
without sacrificing our individuality.
So it's like this balance between being true to yourself
Right.
and also like engaging with the world in a way
Mhm.
that feels authentic.
Absolutely.
So let's get practical for a second.
Okay.
Like, how do we actually start living out these ideas?
Well, Fromm does give us some clues
Okay, good.
about what kind of economic and political setup would help genuine individualism to thrive.
So what's he talking about there?
So he talks a lot about the need for a planned economy,
Okay.
but one that puts human well-being first,
Not just profits.
not just profits exactly.
Okay.
And he also emphasizes the importance of everyone having a real say
Yeah.
in shaping society and their workplaces.
So it's about having a voice
Right.
and being heard.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what about like capitalism versus socialism?
Well, that's interesting because from
Yeah.
Fromm, he was actually cautious about both extremes.
Okay.
Like he saw unbridled capitalism
All right.
as a potential threat
Okay.
to individual freedom,
Okay.
but he also saw authoritarian socialism
Right.
as being a problem as well.
Yeah, like too much control either way.
Exactly. Too much control either way is going to squash that individual initiative.
So his views on economics and politics are pretty complex.
Oh, they are.
And we're just kind of getting started here.
Yeah, we're just scratching the surface.
But I'm curious, like, what would you say is the most important takeaway from Somm's analysis of freedom and democracy?
Well, I think for me, what really jumps out
Yeah.
is his emphasis on individual initiative
Okay.
and active participation. Like
Okay.
he believed that genuine freedom,
Yeah.
it can only happen
Right.
when people have a real role
Okay.
in shaping their own lives
Mm-hmm.
and the society they live in,
Both economically and politically.
both economically and politically. Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense, but it also raises some pretty big questions, doesn't it?
It does.
Like, how do you balance individual freedom
Right.
with the needs of a planned economy?
Yeah, that's a big one.
And how do you make sure that individual initiative
Yeah,
doesn't just lead to chaos?
right. Like everyone just doing their own thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I guess we've got some more to unpack here.
We do. We got a lot more to talk about.
All right, well, let's take another quick break,
Okay.
and we'll come back and dive into those questions.
That's a really tough question.
Hmm.
But I think even with all his criticisms of modern society, Fromm still had this hopefulness about human nature.
Yeah, I get that sense too.
Like deep down, he believed that if we can just become aware of those forces that are kind of shaping our lives, well, then we can start pushing back and creating new possibilities for ourselves.
So it's like waking up, you
Yeah.
know? Like right now, we're kind of sleepwalking through life, just conforming without even realizing it.
Exactly. It's about becoming conscious and taking back that power to choose.
Okay, but how do we even start that process? Where do we begin?
Well, Fromm always emphasized the importance of self-awareness.
Okay.
Like really understanding our own psychology, our fears, our desires, all those things that have conditioned us to think and act in certain ways. And once we understand those patterns, well, we can start breaking free.
It sounds like a pretty intense journey, though.
It is. It's a lifelong process of growth and self-discovery.
But I think what Fromm is suggesting is that it's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the path to a more authentic and meaningful life.
And thankfully, Fromm's work gives us some tools to help us along the way.
Yeah, he gives us a lot to think about.
Like what kinds of things?
Well, he talks a lot about the importance of critical thinking.
Okay.
Really questioning all those assumptions and beliefs that we've just accepted without really examining them. And also developing our emotional intelligence.
So we can better understand our own feelings and the feelings of others?
Exactly. And most importantly, he says we need to cultivate a deep connection with our true selves.
I love that. But one thing that keeps coming up for me
Yeah.
is this idea that freedom and democracy aren't just things that are given to us.
They're not. We have to work for them.
Exactly. It requires constant effort and engagement.
Fromm would definitely agree with that. He saw it as a call to action.
What do you mean?
He's saying, hey, we need to be more conscious. We need to be more deliberate in how we're shaping our lives and the world around us.
That's a big responsibility.
It is, but it's also incredibly empowering.
It makes me think about Fromm's idea of the automaton.
Right, the person who's just going through the motions.
Yeah. Like, are we really living authentically, or are we just playing these roles that society has given us?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And I think Fromm is pushing us to really confront that, to examine our lives, our choices, our beliefs, and ask, are these really mine, or am I just a product of my environment?
That's a scary question to ask.
They can be. It could be disorienting, even a little frightening.
Because what happens when we start peeling back those layers?
Right.
And realize that we might not be as free or as individualistic as we thought we were?
Well, it can definitely be unsettling, but Fromm believed it was ultimately liberating.
So even though it's tough, facing that reality is actually the key to finding more joy and meaning?
It's like breaking free from those chains of conformity. It's tough, but it's worth it.
But if everyone's striving for this individual authenticity, wouldn't that just lead to chaos?
That's a common concern.
Yeah.
But Fromm didn't think so. He actually believed that a society that values individual freedom would be more likely to create cooperation. Yeah. He thought it would foster more creativity and a genuine concern for the well-being of others.
Because when you're secure in yourself,
Exactly.
you're more open to connecting with other people.
And you're more likely to contribute to the common good.
So it's not about everyone just doing their own thing.
No, it's about finding that balance between individual freedom and social responsibility.
Because ultimately they're interconnected.
You can't have one without the other.
Wow, this has been such a thought-provoking deep dive.
It really has.
But I think the big question I'm left with is, what can we as individuals do to create this positive freedom in our own lives and in the world around us?
Well, Fromm gives us a lot of guidance there.
Like what?
He encourages us to practice critical thinking, question our assumptions,
Yeah.
develop our emotional intelligence, find work that feels meaningful, nurture genuine relationships, and really take an active role in shaping our communities.
So it's not just about our inner world.
No, it's about our outer world as well. It's about our connection to something bigger than ourselves.
From Jom's perspective on freedom is so holistic. It's not just a political idea. It's a way of life.
And it's a way of life that's available to everyone.
It's inspiring to think that no matter who we are or where we come from, we all have the potential to cultivate this positive freedom.
We just have to be willing to do the work.
Well said. This deep dive has really only scratched the surface of Escape from Freedom.
It's such a rich book.
It really is, and it's full of insights that are just as relevant today as they were when it was first published.
I think anyone who's interested in understanding themselves and the world we live in should definitely check it out.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into Erich Fromm's ideas. I hope you found it as thought